Welcome to the Daily Allegory through Astrological Divination. Our motto today is document the truth. Let their triangles collapse on paper. Today's story is about a man and a woman who finds themselves unwillingly entangled with a persistently delusional woman who insists, without evidence, that they spend their days orchestrating dilemmas and delay around her, even though they want nothing more than to be left alone and live freely outside of her narratives. She repeatedly claims strangers are her friends or family adjacent, dragging them into forced cooperation through manufactured conflict of interest scenarios that could make them look like accomplices or accessories if her stories are taken at face value. Keep that in mind. Realizing how dangerous her accusations are, the pair responds with disciplined damage control. Calm psychological de-escalation, meticulous documentation, and a clean record that separates verifiable incidents from speculation. Reporting only what can be proven, but the situation worsens when authorities appear to echo parts of the delusional narrative, tightening the net around the wrong people until the twist reveals the couple's true strategy the entire time. They have been assembling an ironclad mosaic, not just about her behavior, but about the web of individuals she brags are protecting her and enabling crimes, collecting timestamps, connections, and corroborations while her arrogance fills in the missing pieces. Once the bigger picture finally locks into place, the response is swift and surgical. No-knock warrants, coordinated raids, and sudden indictments that drop on a cold afternoon while everyone is going about their business, exposing just how many people were sheltered behind her loudest lies. This is the Capricorn Files. The man kept two calendars. The one that hung in public, birthdays, bills, deadlines, and the one that he never let anybody touch. It was a grid of planetary angles scribbled in graphite that smudged like secrets. The second calendar was the only one that made sense anymore. It warned him when desire would masquerade as play, when devotion would turn contractual, when the wound would reopen just to see if it still bled. It told him in cold Capricorn ink, Arlo, knock it off, that love could be weaponized. The woman he lived with called it his sky math. She didn't mock it, not exactly. She'd seen enough men trained use worse systems. Dogma, ego, a badge to justify bad instincts. If the sky helped him stay calm, if it helped him measure what reality was instead of what people said it should be, then she let him keep his private universe. Besides, she had her own methods, special training that she didn't really talk about. The kind that taught you how to sit in a room without feeling seen, how to read hands and exits and lies, how to make your breathing slow enough that someone else's panic couldn't hook into it. Together, they had built a life designed for quiet. No drama, no triangles, no borrowed chaos. That was the plan. Then his ex returned like a thrown knife. It started with messages that would arrive at odd hours, all day, all night, whenever, and read like overheard thoughts. Accusations folded into affection, affection folded into accusation, a complaint that he was ruining her day, followed by a memory that never even happened. A demand that he stop causing drama and delay when he hadn't spoken to her in months. She was convinced fervently and immovably that the man and woman spent their days engineering inconveniences around her, rearranging the world to humiliate, obstruct, and steal her time. The tragedy that was how irrelevant she actually was to them, though. They didn't want revenge. They didn't want contact. They wanted distance so complete it could be mistaken for death. But her false narratives didn't require proximity. They required only a target. And once she chose a target, she basically treated it like a prophecy. She began telling people they were all friends, not metaphorically, legally. She claimed a man still belonged to her, still family, still partner, still obligated. She claimed a woman was her sister in one conversation, her cousin in another, her best friend in a third. Each claim came with a demand. Prove it. If the man refused the answer, that meant he's hiding something. No way in hell it meant that he just didn't want to engage or humor a conversation that was nonsensical, bullshit, and or badgering. And if the woman stayed silent, that meant she was in on it. Conspiracy, of course. Triangulation, the woman called it. A third point jammed into every intersection until no one could see the original lie anymore. It was how unstable systems stabilize themselves, by forcing everybody else to carry the wobble. Soon, strangers began approaching them with the kind of cautious friendliness that wasn't really friendly at all. Some hinted that they had heard things. Some asked invasive questions wrapped in concern. Some even offered help, but that almost felt like bait. The ex's narrative metastasized through social space like mold, and every time someone believed her friend claim, even politely, it created a paper trail of association. A sticky implication that could be twisted into cooperation, and cooperation can always be spun into complicity. Conflict of interest, the man muttered one night, watching yet another voicemail transcribe itself into absolute incoherent nonsense. Accessory, accomplice, type shit. All because someone wants to be important in a story where they're irrelevant and unimportant. The woman didn't argue. She simply opened a black notebook and wrote down the time, the number, the exact words, and the emotional temperature. Because the woman had learned something the hard way. When reality gets contested, the person with the best records becomes the author. They decided on 3 rules together. Rule number 1, no voice calls, no hallway conversations, no quick chats. Everything in writing when possible, screenshots, copies, dates, everything with a timestamp. Or they can be verified through court-appointed means of communication. Rule number 2, no reactant to provocation. Emotion was fuel, and we're about to starve the fire. Rule 3, if something crossed the line into a real threat, they would report only what they could prove and only what mattered. No speculation, no insults, no diagnosing. Truth, not theater. The man called it a quantum tactic. Observation collapses probability into fact. If they observed cleanly and accurately, then the ex's shifting realities would have fewer places to hide, collapsing unto themselves. The woman called it simple discipline. Don't let someone else's madness write your confession. In the man's private calendar, the week was marked in sharp strokes. Venus conjunct Mars in the 5th, desire and conflict performing as entertainment. Venus sextile Saturn in the 7th, boundaries and contracts, partnerships are being tested. Venus trine Uranus in the 8th, sudden ruptures and shared resources, and secrets detonating. Venus sextile Neptune at a sensitive degree in the 9th, institutions, belief, law, and fog. Venus conjunct Pluto in the 10th, reputation, power, and public destruction. That's when you're going to watch. At Venus square Chiron, wounded love turning vengeful, old pain demanding payment in full. Over all of it, like weather that never fully cleared, a Capricorn stellium, Venus, Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Moon, cold focus, relentless cause and effect, ambition and restraint welded together, and beneath that, a Pisces stellium, North Node, Saturn, Neptune, fate, consequences, illusion, and an oceanic pool of things that can't be argued with, only survived. The ex didn't know astrology, not the technical kind, only the Facebook, Instagram nonsense that, gets passed along as spiritual information. But she lived it. She made love and war indistinguishable. She treated attention like oxygen. She punished distance as betrayal. She flirted with strangers and then accused them of stalking her. She cried family to force closeness, then screamed enemy to justify harm. Every day she built another triangle and shoved people into its corners. Then authorities entered the story, and everything got darker. At first, the man and woman believed the system would see it, a person in crisis, untreated, escalating, spinning delusions into allegations. They expected an intervention, welfare check, something sane. Instead, the first officer who arrived at the door looked at them like suspects who had forgotten their lines. A complaint had been filed. The ex claimed the man was harassing her through coded messages and sabotaging her routine. She claimed a woman was working with him. She claimed there was a network, friends, cousins, co-workers helping them delay her life. The officer listened with a face trained for neutrality, then asked the man why he had done this. The man blinked. The woman felt her training flare, cold and instinctive. This is wrong. They tried again. They showed records, months of no contact, then incoming messages, then escalation. The officer glanced at the phone like it was a prop. He asked if they could just keep the peace. Keep the peace. As if peace was something you can give to a person who didn't recognize reality as a shared space. After the officer left, the woman sat at the kitchen table and quietly wrote, "First compliance event." She didn't mean the officer complied with a crime, only that he complied with a narrative. And narratives, once blessed by authority, turned into cages. More officers came, and more paperwork. Each visit followed the same pattern. The ex's claims were treated as emotionally true, even when factually absurd. The man and woman became characters in her story simply because she named them. The ex used the oldest trick in the book. She weaponized relationship. He's my ex. She's my friend. We're family. She braided intimacy and accusation until it was impossible to pull one free without touching the other. Triangulation again. Always triangulation. Very predictable triangulation. Then the first twist arrived, not like revelation, but like a small tear in the wallpaper. A different officer came one afternoon, alone, quieter than the rest. He didn't sit. He didn't ask the man why he'd done this. He asked instead, almost casually, if the man had any reason to believe the ex's family was involved in other activities. The woman watched the officer's eyes. They didn't dart. They didn't puff with righteous certainty. They were measuring, not accusing. When a man answered carefully, only what he could prove, only what was documented or left in digital footprint, the officer nodded once, as if confirming a shape he already suspected. After he left, the woman said, "They're not all buying it." The man stared at his second calendar, Venus sextile Neptune in the ninth, institutions, fog, belief, the law swallowing illusions and calling it procedure. Or, he said, they're buying it publicly and hunting privately. The second twist came with a restraining order. It arrived folded and official, stamped and severe, alleging the man had been obsessively contacting her and contacting the sex, that he was a danger, that the woman was a co-conspirator. Their names, unredacted, sat on the page like a curse. The man read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition could make it less real. The woman, however, noticed a detail no one else would have. The notary seal looked wrong. The formation was slightly off. A letter in the county header was misaligned. She held it to the light. "This isn't real," she said. The man felt something cold and heavy slide into place. If someone could forge the court, then the ex wasn't just delusional. She was being used. Or she was using her delusions as camouflage, or both. They reported the forgery. They logged every step, who they spoke to, what was said, what was promised. Weeks passed. No one called back. That was when the woman's training stopped being a silent companion and became a blade. She proposed a test. Not to trap anyone illegally, of course, but to reveal the shape of the network around the X. They would create 3 versions of the same harmless fact: a changed appointment time, a minor schedule shift, and share each version through a different channel. If the X responded with knowledge she shouldn't have, they would know which channel was leaking, which third point in the triangle was transmitting. The man didn't like it. It felt like playing chess with someone who ate pieces. But he understood the logic. In quantum terms, you didn't chase particles. You measured the field. They ran the test, and 2 days later, the X sent a message. "Nice try changing your appointment. I already told them you'd do that. Only one channel had that appointment detail. The link wasn't random. It was a shape now. Venus conjunct Pluto in the 10th. The man wrote that night. Reputation, power, public pressure. Someone was turning their lives into theater, and the audience included people with authority." Then the third twist. The ex began bragging. Not in private, loudly and publicly, messily. Online posts, voice notes forwarded by strangers, comments made in waiting rooms as if the world were her stage. She talked about protection. She talked about connections. Made mentions of her family being a force to reckon with on court-appointed apps. She talked about being untouchable because her family had people in places. They knew things. They had connections. She said it with the blissful arrogance of someone who believes the world is a rigged game and she is on the winning side. The man and the woman watched the bragging carefully, like watching smoke to locate the fire, because most narratives have an undertone of truth, and truth will always exude a body language that is easily read by somebody trained and or versed in reading people's body language. Because bragging is a confession with makeup on. She named associations. She hinted at favors. She referenced, "No one will touch me." She suggested people were handling things behind the scenes. She used triangulation as a crown. "Look how many points I control." The man's Capricorn moon went flat with certainty. She's painting the mosaic for us. Letter. That was the twist no one else saw. The man and the woman were not only defending themselves, they were building a case, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Every time the ex claimed friendship, the couple documented the person she bragged into her orbit. Every time she bragged about protection, they documented the implied protector. Every time she invoked family, they mapped the family. It wasn't hard with how much we talk sometimes. The verbal diarrhea when we have something to prove gets the best of a lot of people. Every time an authority figure repeated her narrative, they logged a repetition like a fingerprint. They did not exaggerate. They did not interpret. They did not label her with diagnoses or insult in any report. It recorded behaviors and facts, pattern behavior, to present as a psychological analysis report. Because facts were the only thing that survived contact with power. The man layered astrology over it like an additional lens, not as proof, but as pattern recognition. He noticed that her most theatrical escalations coincided with the play fight signature of a Venus conjunct Mars in the 5th. Romance weaponized into spectacle. Her sudden swings from seduction to accusation felt like a performance designed to force reaction. It's kind of like poking the bear to provoke a reaction to use, to weaponize. It's crazy, right? Then when she demanded closure in the form of signatures and agreements, forced meetings, despite no contact PFAs, Venus sextile Saturn in the 7th flared up as partners and as contracts, relationships as a legal trap. When she leaked private details and finances, became a theme, more focus on finance and home. I know what you have. I know what you own. I can ruin you. The man watched Venus trine Uranus in the 8th crackle, shared resources, sudden shocks, hidden entanglements snapping. And when her story drifted towards institutions, religion, foreign travel, law, my rights, your crimes, they believe me. Venus sextile Neptune in the 9th rolled in like a monster truck. The fog of belief wrapped in the machinery of justice. The woman didn't just care about the sky, she cared about ground truth. Who called whom? Who threatened what? Who repeated which claim? What past dismissed allegation has started to repeat with evidence to substantiate prior statements? But she admitted once in a whisper only the kitchen walls heard that the man's calendar helped her anticipate the kind of danger coming. Not the details, the flavor, the rhythm. Then came the cruelest twist. The man became the villain on paper. A detective, no name, only a badge and a steady voice, told the man it would be best if he stopped documenting so much. The detective said the man's records made him look obsessive. Provoking her, if you will. The detective suggested the woman's training made her look calculated. The detective implied that if they kept pushing, they might find themselves in trouble too. Triangulation again, if you will. Authority inserted as the third point to pressure compliance. The man felt the old wound behind his ribs. Venus square Chiron. Love as injury. Intimacy as punishment. History repeating with new costumes. His ex had always demanded he prove he cared by surrendering his boundaries. Now the system was doing the same. The woman, staring at the detective, said something that made the room go still. If your advice is to stop keeping accurate records, could please put that in writing? For our records. The detective's face tightened for half a second. He never put it in writing. After that, the visit stopped. For a while. Silence settled, thin, suspicious like dust on a weapon. The man and woman almost believed the ex had finally lost interest. Almost believed the world had moved on. Then one cold afternoon, so ordinary, it felt like a prank. The sky collapsed. It began with sirens in the distance, not one, not two, but a course, spreading like a bruise across the city. The man and woman stood at their windows watching unmarked vehicles glide in pairs, watching uniforms gather where uniforms never gather. The woman's training lifted the hair on her arms. This isn't for us, she said. This is bigger. The man checked his second calendar without thinking. Pisces Stellium. Pressure on. Saturn, Neptune, North Node. Fate, fog, and consequence. The tide is rolling in. They didn't know yet that the authorities had been building their own mosaic in parallel. They didn't know that the quiet officer who asked about other activities was not a lone curiosity, but the edge of a knife. They didn't know that the forged restraining order had been the crack that let investigators see what else was being forged. Because when you forge signatures and you forge documents and you submit them into court systems, they're recorded. Forensics can pick up on that. Hand signature masters, they can detect even the slightest change in anybody's hand curve, if you will. Licenses, affidavits, documents that kept certain people safe and others trapped. They didn't know that the ex's loud bragging about protection, her arrogant comfort, had functioned like a lantern in a cave, illuminating a network that preferred darkness. They only knew what they could see, though. A convoy stopping 3 blocks away. Doors opening in unison, bodies moving with coordinated purpose, no knock warrants. The news would later call them a sudden storm of indictments, a synchronizing taking. But in the moment, it looked like the city's spine straightening. Phones buzzed across the kitchen counters, alerts, messages, strangers sending shaky footage. People they didn't even know were suddenly crying. People they did know were suddenly unreachable. Names weren't spoken aloud in their home. The man and the woman didn't celebrate. They didn't gloat. They didn't even exhale fully. They had learned that early celebration invited late punishment, as some people will be learning in the near future. It's like celebrating somebody's death prematurely and they end up resurrecting and coming back. Then the final twist revealed itself, and it was uglier than anything the ex had imagined. The ex wasn't the center of the story. She was the least important character in the whole operation. She just facilitated the takedown. She was the noise that had hidden the signal. Her delusions, whether purely illness, manipulation, or both, had functioned as cover for crimes happening in her orbit. And her constant insistence that everyone was her friend, her family, her protected circle had braided a web of associations so bold that it became traceable. She had triangulated half the town into her narrative, and in doing so, she had inadvertently triangulated investigators into the truth. Follow the friends. Follow the family. Follow the ones who keep showing up when they really shouldn't be showing up at all. The man and woman's documentation didn't just save them, it filled in the gaps. Their records showed patterns of contact, coordination, intimidation, and forgery. Their disciplined refusal to speculate made their reports clean enough to be used without embarrassment. Their obsession with accuracy, Capricorn's cold gift, became the difference between being accused and being believed. The ex who had demanded relevance like oxygen had finally become relevant, but in the worst possible way. By nightfall, the neighborhood was quieter than it had been in months. Quiet the way a room is quiet after a scream. The man sat at the table, hands still, staring at the calendar, where Venus conjunct Pluto in the 10th loomed like a verdict. The public face of power, the collapsing of reputations, the exposure of who held whom. The woman closed her black notebook and didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was flat with exhaustion, not triumph. She used triangles to trap people, she said. But triangles work both ways. 3 if you're really creative. The man nodded slowly, feeling the Pisces tide recede just enough to reveal the wreckage left behind. In the days that followed, it became clear how close they'd come to being swallowed by somebody else's story. And this is how other people accidentally become accomplices to crimes when they're associated to somebody else who's an accessory to. How easily friend, family, and association could have turned into a charge. Federal charge at that. How readily a false narrative could have become an official one if they hadn't anchored themselves to proof. And somewhere inside the machinery of consequence, sealed documents. Closed door hearings, paper moving in stacks, the ex's voice still echoed, insisting that she was protected, insisting that she was untouchable, insisting everyone loved her enough to go down with her. She had wanted triangulation to be her shield. Instead, it became the map. And when you know how to read maps, embedded or not, that can really, really fuck your world up. And when the system finally saw the full mosaic she had illuminated with her own arrogance, it moved the way a winter ocean moves, cold, fast, and indifferent to begging. The last message the man received from her arrived without punctuation, a frantic string of blame and longing and threats. He didn't answer. He saved it. He timestamped it. He added it to the file, because the truth, in the end, was the darkest part. They had not defeated her with force. They had survived her by refusing to become a character in her delusion. They had remained 2 points on a line, steady, documented, unromantic in their honesty, until every triangle she built collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. And on the cold afternoon when indictments felt like a sudden snow, the man understood what his calendar had been trying to tell him all along. When Venus in Capricorn loves, it does not play. When Venus conjuncts Pluto wants control, it takes careers and reputations with it. When Venus squares Chiron, the wound doesn't just ache, it hunts. And when Saturn and Neptune gather in Pisces, illusion does not disappear gently. It floods. It drowns. It reveals what was always there, waiting under the surface, until the one thing left to hold on to is the record of what happened, written by the ones who refused to lie. I'm just going to end that one there. Hopefully you found it entertaining. Make good choices.